Welcome back to the 4DMed Update. There have been some amazing advancements recently at 4DMed, and here to talk about these developments is the director of 4DMed, Dr. Neville Shimmin. Welcome back to the show.
Thank you, Andy. It's great to be back, and I look forward to talking to you.
It's good to have you back. Maybe you can fill us in and tell us the latest at 4DMed.
Great question, Andy. Well, as you know, we're always focusing on making our virtual reality platform as realistic as possible. So we've been looking at developing and focusing on producing high quality content for our virtual simulations that are used by medical students to train. This involves carefully mapping and producing highly accurate representations of equipment inside, for example, an A&E room or a surgical bay. I'll give you an example. Just something like a hospital bed has many levers and positions that can be altered on it. So those need to be simulated accurately so the patient is put in the correct position by the medical student.
What are some of the plans for the coming year?
Andy, that's a great question. I think we want to restart things post-COVID and focus on getting back onto our timelines for development of content. And the really exciting news is we're opening an office in Singapore. So we will be able to network with all the medical students in the region and medical schools, specifically in places like Malaysia and China and Thailand and Taiwan and Singapore, and be able to network with those individuals, because our aim is to develop hyper-realistic simulated information and scenarios for their specific training syllabus. So each medical school has its own idiosyncrasies and their own equipment on which they train their medical students. So we want to be able to tailor and customize a solution for them.
What progress has 4DMed made in the development of software like the virtual hospital?
Well, Andy, as you know, we don't want to just simulate specific small-scale scenarios. We want to be able to train a student to be able to receive a patient from a specific part in the hospital and walk them through the experience that they will have when they're operating in a municipal hospital to the final position where the patient might be. For example, they'll receive them in an A&E department, where they'll interact in that setting with equipment and perform a procedure, because potentially the patient may come in with chest pains. And then that particular patient may require a surgical procedure. And then the student will be in a position where they'll be in the surgical bay performing those procedures. The patient will then go into an inpatient situation. They'll go into a bed in the hospital ward. And again, the student will be able to interact with that particular patient and find out how that post-surgical pain relief, for example, needs to be administered. And so forth until eventually that particular patient becomes an outpatient and the student has experienced the entire cycle of which the patient has traveled through.
What impact has COVID-19 had on business and online education?
That's an important question, Andy, and I can answer it very clearly, because the stress and strain that's been placed on medical staff because of the COVID pandemic over the past 2 years has been enormous. Their priority has been primary care and saving lives, and the ability to work with companies like ourselves and interact on a daily basis to understand their requirements has diminished, as has the ability to reach out and contact them on a more frequent basis. On the positive side of things, this pandemic has brought to the forefront online learning and training. It's now the norm, whereas 2 years ago, it was just a possibility or a nice to have feature. Doctors at medical schools and professors have been teaching online for 2 years now with a variety of platforms, and they've realized that it has great potential to change the way that we learn. Students are able to repeat procedures, revisit training notes, revisit lectures, where previously they couldn't do those things. And it's been a huge advantage for our platforms moving forward in the virtual reality space, where students will be able to interact positively with a variety of teachers from a variety of different institutes and medical schools across the world, and continue to practice procedures again and again, rather than to commit to doing surgeries on, say, a physical cadaver, when they could repeat the procedure many, many times on a virtual cadaver. So it's a very, very exciting time, and the opportunities are unbounded.
When can the company confidently resume operations in full?
I think, Andy, we're over the worst of COVID-19 now. I think certainly from late May, we will be resuming operations as normal, because many of the facilities or our institutions we will be able to have access to prior to the pandemic. As the demand on clinicians and teaching staff falls, we'll be able to interact with them on a more regular basis and reach out to them in a more common and easy way.
What are the latest trends in the industry impacting the product development path?
Andy, the past 2 years has put a tremendous strain on all the logistics operations linked to computer chips, and there's been a global shortage affecting both the automotive industries and the graphics card manufacturers have had an impact on the ability to supply high-end chips. This has affected everybody, including the virtual reality or the gaming industry. Moving forward, I think we'll be seeing prices fall on a large number of components and newer, more dynamic and affordable hardware being developed, which is a great thing for our industry, because pricing is essential for uptake or for new practitioners to embrace virtual reality. So I'm really hoping that this year we will see a sudden drop in GPU and CPU prices and a much more wide availability of hardware built on some of the newer technology that's been on the back burner for the past 2 years due to manufacturing constraints.
Well, there's no doubt that product development will continue to be successful. I'd like to thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Andy, for having the opportunity to talk to you and inform our listeners about the progress and the transformation that's happening at 4DMed.
And that's our program. Thanks for joining us. See you next time.